A service dog barked nonstop at a stroller in the middle of a crowded mall. The mother was furious. Security was called, and shoppers grew irritated. But when the blanket was finally pulled back, what they saw brought the entire crowd to tears. Now, before we get into today's story, drop a comment below telling us where in the world you're watching from. And if you love extraordinary police dog stories like this one, make sure to hit that subscribe button. You won't want to miss what's coming next. The Westfield Shopping Center buzzed with the familiar chaos of weekend shopping. Families pushing strollers laden with bags, teenagers huddled around the food court, and the constant white noise of 1,000 conversations blending beneath the sprawling glass ceiling. Afternoon sunlight streamed through the skylights, casting warm patches across the polished tile floors where shoppers navigated the bustling walkways between storefronts. Jessica Winters moved through the Saturday crowd with practiced efficiency, her steps deliberate and measured. At her side walked Echo, a Belgian Malinois wearing a professional red service vest with medical alert patches. Unlike the rushed shoppers who bumped shoulders and dodged around each other, Echo moved with military precision, maintaining perfect heel position despite the chaos, his attentive brown eyes occasionally glancing up at Jessica's face to check her status. "Excuse us, please," Jessica murmured as they navigated past a group of teenagers who had stopped abruptly to take selfies in front of a clothing display. She kept her right hand loosely on Echo's specialized mobility harness, not because she needed the physical support today, but because the connection grounded her amid the sensory overload of the mall environment. The holiday decorations had already appeared, though Thanksgiving was still 2 weeks away. Giant silver and red ornaments hung from the ceiling, and synthetic pine garlands draped the railings of the second-floor walkways. A distant piano rendition of Winter Wonderland competed with the cacophony of the crowd, the music barely audible above the din of conversations, squeaking stroller wheels, and the occasional announcement over the mall's PA system. Jessica checked her watch. 2:17 p.m. She had planned this trip carefully, arriving after the lunch rush but before the evening crowd descended. Her mental checklist was nearly complete. New running shoes, the birthday gift for her niece, and just one more stop at the bookstore to pick up the novel her book club was reading next. Then she could return to the quiet sanctuary of her apartment before the familiar tension in her shoulders evolved into a full-blown anxiety attack. Echo remained steady beside her, his training evident in every controlled movement. Unlike pet dogs, who might sniff at dropped food or strain toward interesting scents, he remained focused solely on Jessica and potential threats to her well-being. When a toddler suddenly screamed at a nearby toy store, Echo immediately checked out Jessica's reaction, ready to provide deep pressure therapy if the sound triggered her. But today was a good day. Jessica merely flinched, then continued walking with a deep breath. The central court of the mall opened before them, a circular area with a decorative fountain surrounded by benches where tired shoppers rested their feet. Jessica steered them toward the less crowded path along the outer edge, avoiding the dense cluster of people gathered around a weekend product demonstration. Echo adjusted his pace perfectly, navigating the space as if he and Jessica were a single entity moving through the crowd, their coordination the result of thousands of hours together. Jessica hadn't always needed Echo at her side. 5 years ago, she had been Staff Sergeant Jessica Winters, a combat medic with the 4th Infantry Division, known for staying impossibly calm during the worst mass casualty situations. She'd treated wounded soldiers under fire, stabilized blast injuries in helicopters, and once performed an emergency airway procedure during a sandstorm with almost zero visibility. Her commanding officers had called her unshakable. Then came the roadside bomb outside Kandahar. Jessica had been the first responder, treating 3 critically wounded soldiers while waiting for medevac. She'd saved all 3, but the 4th, her closest friend on the deployment, had died despite her desperate efforts. The aftermath had been crystal clear: traumatic brain injury, shrapnel wounds to her left leg, and the invisible wounds of PTSD that ultimately proved more debilitating than her physical injuries. Civilian life had become a minefield of triggers. Crowds, sudden noises, certain smells that transported her instantly back to the worst moments of her service. She'd tried therapy, medication, support groups. Nothing fully worked until the VA's service dog program matched her with Echo 3 years ago. Echo wasn't just any service dog. The Belgian Malinois had washed out of a military working dog program, not for lack of ability, but for being too gentle, an attribute that made him perfect for medical alert work. His specialized training included detecting the subtle biochemical changes preceding Jessica's panic attacks and seizures, a complication from her TBI that occurred rarely but dangerously. He's reading your body chemistry, the trainer had explained during their placement. Changes in your breath, microscopic perspiration, even shifts in your gait that you won't notice consciously. Echo will alert before you even know something's wrong. Their connection had grown beyond the parameters of training. Echo had an uncanny ability to assess threats in Jessica's environment, distinguishing between harmless stressors and genuine dangers. He would place his body between Jessica and anything that might trigger her, whether approaching strangers or unexpected movements, while remaining practically invisible during normal interactions. Most importantly, Echo had given Jessica back her independence. Before him, she'd barely left her apartment, missing medical appointments and isolating from friends and family. Now, she volunteered twice weekly at the VA hospital, had resumed her education in nursing, and could navigate public spaces like this mall. Still difficult, but manageable with Echo's steady presence and alerting skills. What most people didn't understand when they saw Jessica and Echo was that beneath his calm professional exterior was a dog who could detect microscopic chemical changes imperceptible to any human sense or medical device. His alerting behavior wasn't just good training, it was a sophisticated biological detection system paired with unwavering devotion. Jessica guided Echo toward the central court fountain, planning to cut across to reach the bookstore on the opposite side. They were passing a row of benches near the fountain when Echo's demeanor changed. His ears pricked forward, head lifting slightly higher, his gait losing its fluid rhythm for just a step. Jessica noticed immediately. After 3 years together, the slightest changes in Echo's behavior registered like alarm bells. "What is it, buddy?" she murmured, scanning the area for potential triggers. Echo's attention had fixed on something ahead and to their right. Jessica followed his gaze to a navy blue stroller, parked beside a bench, where a woman in her 30s, with dark hair pulled into a messy bun, was sorting through shopping bags. The baby in the stroller appeared to be sleeping peacefully under a light blanket decorated with cartoon elephants. Jessica gently tugged Echo's harness to redirect him. "Come on, focus!" Instead of responding to her command, Echo's posture stiffened further. A low whine escaped his throat, a sound Jessica had rarely heard from her perfectly trained service dog. Echo took a step toward the stroller, breaking his heel position for the first time in public that Jessica could remember. "Echo, heel," Jessica commanded more firmly, embarrassment warming her cheeks as a passing elderly couple glanced their way. Service dogs were supposed to be invisible in public. That was the standard. Echo had never broken protocol like this before. The dog complied reluctantly, returning to her side, but keeping his gaze locked on the stroller. 3 more steps, and Echo halted completely, planting his feet and refusing to move away from the stroller's direction. "Is something wrong with your dog?" the mother asked, noticing Echo's focused attention. Her tone held a hint of annoyance as she glanced between her shopping bags and the service dog. "I'm sorry, he's—" Jessica began, but Echo cut her apology short with a sharp, authoritative bark that echoed across the central court. Shoppers turned toward the sound, expressions ranging from curious to disapproving. "Control your dog, please," the mother said more firmly, her irritation now evident. "You're frightening my baby." But the baby hadn't stirred at the loud bark, something Jessica's training immediately flagged as unusual. Most sleeping infants would startle at such a sound. Echo barked again, then again, each bark growing more insistent. This wasn't aggression, Jessica knew all of Echo's behaviors intimately. This was an alert, the same pattern he used when detecting an impending medical emergency. Ma'am, I think, Jessica started, but the mother cut her off. Service dogs aren't supposed to bark in public, the woman snapped, standing up and moving protectively toward her stroller. You need to leave. Two mall security guards in navy blue uniforms approached, drawn by the commotion. The taller one, a middle-aged man with salt and pepper hair and a name tag reading Wilson, addressed Jessica directly. Ma'am, we've had complaints about your dog disrupting shoppers. Is everything all right? Echo continued barking, straining toward the stroller with uncharacteristic intensity. Jessica felt dozens of eyes on her, judging, assuming she couldn't control her service dog. The pressure to apologize and leave was overwhelming. But Echo's behavior told a different story, one that years of partnership had taught her to trust. My service dog is medically trained, Jessica explained, struggling to keep her voice steady. He's specifically alerting to something concerning that baby. This isn't normal behavior for him. The second security guard, a younger woman with her hair pulled back in a tight ponytail, stepped closer to the mother. Ma'am, would you mind checking on your child, just to be safe? This is ridiculous, the mother protested. She's fine, just taking her afternoon nap. I've been shopping for less than an hour. Wilson frowned, clearly uncomfortable with the situation. Ma'am, he addressed Jessica, service animals aren't supposed to be disruptive in public spaces. Mall policy requires that. I understand mall policy, Jessica interrupted, her military training coming through in her voice. But Echo doesn't alert like this without reason. He's detecting something medically serious. Echo had now entered his full medical alert posture, sitting rigidly, barking in the distinct three-bark pattern, then pawing at the ground. It was the same sequence he used when detecting Jessica's rare seizures before they happened, a behavior that had saved her from serious injury multiple times. Look, Jessica continued, drawing on her medical background, I was a combat medic. Echo is trained to detect certain medical emergencies. Something is wrong with that baby, and every second we stand here arguing could matter. Jessica had first met Echo on a rainy Tuesday at the Patriot Service Dogs Training Center in Colorado. Fresh out of intensive therapy, still using a cane for her left leg, she'd been skeptical that a dog could accomplish what medication and counseling hadn't. Unlike the enthusiastic greeting Jessica expected, Echo had approached her slowly, methodically sniffing her hands, her legs, her breath. Then he'd sat directly in front of her, his eyes never leaving her face, as if he were memorizing every detail. The breakthrough in their partnership came 3 months into their training. Their early days had been challenging. Jessica's inconsistent symptoms meant Echo needed to recognize patterns that even medical devices couldn't always detect. They practiced with scent samples collected when Jessica was experiencing pre-seizure states, anxiety attacks, and normal days, training Echo to differentiate between them. Then, one evening, Jessica had been having coffee with her roommate when Echo suddenly began his alert pattern, sitting rigidly, giving 3 sharp barks, then pawing the ground. Jessica felt fine and assumed it was a training error. Echo, settle, she'd commanded. But instead of obeying, Echo had turned to her roommate, Diane, repeating the alert pattern with increasing urgency. Maybe he needs to go out, Diane had suggested, standing up. She'd taken 2 steps before collapsing to the floor. The paramedics later confirmed she'd experienced a dangerous blood sugar crash that could have resulted in a coma if she'd been alone. Echo hadn't been alerting for Jessica at all. He'd detected Diane's dropping glucose levels, a condition she hadn't even been diagnosed with yet. After that day, Jessica's trust in Echo became absolute. When he alerted, she listened, regardless of whether she felt symptoms herself. That history of trust was what gave Jessica the confidence to stand her ground now. Despite the disapproving stares and the mother's resistance, Echo had earned her trust through proven reliability, and she would honor their partnership by advocating for his alert, no matter how uncomfortable the situation became. A small crowd had gathered, murmuring among themselves. An older woman stepped forward. Maybe you should check the baby, dear. Better safe than sorry. The mother's confidence wavered slightly as she glanced at her still motionless child. "She's just a heavy sleeper," she insisted, but uncertainty had crept into her voice. "Your baby hasn't moved at all despite the noise," Jessica pointed out quietly. "Not even a startled response to Echo's barking. That's not normal for an infant." The mother's expression shifted as this observation registered. She turned toward the stroller, tension visible in her shoulders. Please," Jessica said, her voice softening. "Echo has never been wrong about a medical alert. Never once in 3 years. I wouldn't insist if I wasn't concerned for your daughter." The security guards exchanged glances, clearly unsure of protocol for this unusual situation. Wilson stepped closer to the stroller. "Ma'am, would you mind if we just take a quick look, then everyone can go about their day?" The mother hesitated, then finally nodded, stepping toward the stroller. "Fine. I'll show you that she's just sleeping, and then I expect an apology." Jessica stayed back, keeping Echo steady as the mother leaned over the stroller and gently pulled back the elephant-patterned blanket. The woman's irritated expression suddenly transformed, her face draining of color. "Madison," she said, her voice rising. When the infant didn't respond, she touched her daughter's cheek. "Madison, wake up, baby." The security guards moved forward immediately as the mother's voice escalated to panic. "She's not waking up!" she cried, frantically unbuckling the stroller straps. "Something's wrong! Help!" Wilson immediately radioed for medical assistance while his partner helped the mother lift the unresponsive infant from the stroller. The baby's lips had a slightly bluish tinge, and though her chest moved with shallow breaths, she remained completely unresponsive to her mother's increasingly desperate attempts to wake her. "I'm a former combat medic," Jessica said, stepping forward with calm authority. "May I help while we wait for medical personnel?" The mother nodded frantically, tears streaming down her face as Jessica approached. Echo remained perfectly behaved now, his urgent alerting replaced with attentive monitoring. Jessica checked the baby's vital signs with practiced efficiency. She's breathing, but it's shallow. Pulse is present, but slow. She looked at the mother. "Has Madison been ill recently? Any medical conditions?" "No, nothing," the mother stammered. "She had a routine checkup last week. Everything was perfect. She just fell asleep during shopping." An older man stepped forward from the gathered crowd. "I'm Dr. Brenner, pediatrician. May I examine her?" With the mother's permission, the doctor quickly assessed the infant. "Pupils are responsive but sluggish," he noted. "Temperature seems normal." He looked at Jessica and lowered his voice. "This looks neurological. How long has she been unresponsive?" "I don't know," the mother sobbed. "She fell asleep maybe 40 minutes ago. She's usually a heavy sleeper during shopping trips. The motion of the stroller—" Her voice broke as the reality hit her. "Oh God, has she been like this the whole time? I thought she was just sleeping." Mall medical personnel arrived with a first aid kit and oxygen. Moments later, paramedics pushed through the crowd with a gurney and pediatric medical equipment. "Service dog alerted to the baby," Dr. Brenner explained to the paramedics. "Infant is unresponsive but breathing. Possible neurological event." As the paramedics began their assessment, the lead EMT glanced at Echo. "Belgian Malinois medical alert dog. They're amazing scent detectors. We had one alert to a carbon monoxide victim who showed no visible symptoms last year." "Their olfactory capabilities are extraordinary," Dr. Brenner added, watching Echo with newfound respect. "Some studies suggest they can detect molecular changes at concentrations of parts per trillion. That's like finding a drop of blood in 20 Olympic swimming pools." The medical applications are still being discovered, particularly for conditions where early detection dramatically improves outcomes. Ramirez nodded as he attached a pulse oximeter to Madison's tiny finger. "I've seen dogs detect seizures before clinical onset, identify malignancies before scans could, even predict cardiac events. This little one is fortunate that you and your partner were here today." The mother, who had introduced herself as Amber Parker, clutched her daughter's small hand. "Your dog knew," she whispered. "How could he possibly know when I didn't?" The paramedics worked with swift efficiency, securing the infant to the pediatric backboard and attaching monitoring equipment. The lead paramedic, whose name tag read Ramirez, studied the readings with a furrowed brow. Oxygen saturation is lower than I'd like, he noted, placing a tiny oxygen mask over Madison's face. And these readings suggest possible seizure activity, though not convulsive. We're looking at what might be absent seizures or a postictal state. What does that mean? Will she be okay? Amber asked, clutching her daughter's hand. We need to get her to Children's Hospital for proper diagnosis, Ramirez explained. But the good news is we're catching this early before any oxygen deprivation could cause damage. A female paramedic was checking Madison's vital signs again when she paused, leaning closer to examine something. Ms. Parker, has Madison been prescribed any medications recently? No, nothing, Amber responded. She's never been on medication. The paramedic pointed to barely visible marks on the inside of Madison's elbow. These look like injection sites, but very small, the kind we see with certain medical tests. The only needle she's had was for routine vaccinations at her checkup last week, Amber explained, confusion evident in her voice. Dr. Brenner examined the marks and frowned. These are more recent than a week ago, and they're not consistent with standard vaccination injections. Echo suddenly returned to alert posture, looking intently at the diaper bag hanging from the stroller handle. Jessica recognized this specific behavior. Echo had detected something relevant. Ma'am, Jessica said carefully, would you mind if we check Madison's diaper bag? Echo is alerting to something there. Amber nodded immediately. All earlier skepticism vanished. Of course, anything that might help. Security Officer Wilson retrieved the bag, and Jessica guided Echo through a careful sniff investigation. The dog immediately indicated a side pocket, repeatedly touching it with his nose in the pattern he used for detecting substances. Inside the pocket, they found a small medicine bottle labeled as infant acetaminophen, but the security seal was broken and it was only half full. I didn't put that there, Amber said, her face paling further. That's not our brand, and Madison hasn't needed any pain medication. Ramirez carefully secured the bottle in an evidence bag. We'll have this analyzed at the hospital. It's possible it contains something else or has been tampered with. The second paramedic called urgently. Her O2 is dropping. We need to move now. As they prepared to transport Madison, Echo whined softly and placed his head against Jessica's leg, his way of communicating that his job was done. He had detected whatever was wrong long before humans could see the symptoms, potentially saving the child from a much worse outcome. Your dog is extraordinary, Dr. Brenner told Jessica as the paramedics began moving the gurney. I've practiced pediatrics for 30 years, and I couldn't see any signs of distress just looking at that child. Yet he knew immediately. Amber, walking alongside the gurney, turned back to Jessica. Thank you, she said, tears streaming down her face. I'm so sorry I didn't believe you. If you hadn't insisted. She couldn't finish the sentence. Thank Echo, Jessica replied softly. He's the hero here. The Central Court had transformed into an impromptu command center. Police officers had arrived shortly after Madison was transported, cordoning off the area around the stroller. The bottle from the diaper bag was now evidence in what the lead detective called a potential case of deliberate drugging. Echo sat calmly at Jessica's side as she gave her statement to Detective Portman, a stern-faced woman with compassionate eyes who recorded every detail of Echo's alerting behavior with surprising interest. So your dog detected something wrong with the child before any visible symptoms appeared, Portman clarified. Yes, Jessica confirmed. Echo has specialized scent detection training for medical emergencies. He can detect chemical changes in the body that indicate certain medical events. And you said he specifically alerted to the diaper bag after the child was being treated. Jessica nodded. He has different alert patterns for different situations. His behavior toward the bag suggests he detected a substance there, not just a medical condition. Portman made another note. Ms. Parker mentioned the baby had a checkup last week. We're investigating who might have had access to the child or her belongings since then. Wilson approached with the mall manager, a tightly wound woman in a charcoal suit who introduced herself as Diane Reynolds. Ms. Winters, Reynolds began formally, I want to personally thank you and your service dog for your actions today. Our security team has been directed to review our protocols regarding service animal alerts. She glanced at Wilson, who looked appropriately chastened. We clearly have some training gaps to address. Echo was just doing what he's trained to do, Jessica replied simply. The hospital called with an update, Wilson added. The baby is stabilizing. They're running tests, but the doctor said if she'd gone untreated much longer. He trailed off, the implication clear. A young woman who had been shopping nearby stepped forward hesitantly. I recorded what happened on my phone, she admitted. Not to be weird, but because my brother is applying to service dog programs, and I wanted to show him how they work in public. Would it help the police to have the video? Detective Portman immediately took the woman's contact information. That could be extremely valuable evidence, thank you. As the crowd gradually dispersed, an elderly man approached Jessica. Young lady, I want you to know I've called the local news. People need to hear about this. Not just about the unfortunate situation with the baby, but about the incredible work service dogs like yours perform. Jessica felt a flash of anxiety at the thought of media attention, but Echo immediately pressed against her leg, providing the deep pressure that helped regulate her nervous system. She took a steadying breath, focusing on what mattered most. Madison was receiving treatment, an investigation was underway, and Echo had done exactly what he was trained to do. The police finished securing the scene as Jessica and Echo prepared to leave. Officer Wilson stopped them at the mall entrance. I owe you both an apology, he said sincerely. 20 years in security, and I've never seen anything like what your dog did today. If we'd followed protocol and asked you to leave, he shook his head. Thank you for standing your ground. As Jessica and Echo walked through the parking lot toward her car, the adrenaline from the incident began to fade, leaving her physically drained but mentally clear. She stopped beside her SUV, kneeling down to bring herself eye level with her partner. You did good, buddy, she whispered, running her hands along Echo's face and neck. Really good. Echo's intelligent eyes remained fixed on hers, his expression one of perfect contentment now that his job was complete. He leaned forward, pressing his forehead against Jessica's in the quiet gesture they often shared after difficult moments. Jessica thought about how close she had come to doubting Echo because of social pressure, the stares, the security guards, the mother's initial anger. It would have been easier to apologize and walk away, to assume Echo was having an off day. The weight of public judgment had almost overridden years of partnership and trust. Yet Echo had remained absolutely certain, persisting until someone listened. His certainty had saved a child from what the paramedics suggested might have been a deliberate drugging. The thought sent a chill through Jessica despite the warm afternoon sun. As she started the engine, Jessica's phone buzzed with a text from her VA counselor. Saw the news alert about a service dog saving a baby at Westfield. Was that you and Echo? Call me if you need support after the excitement. News traveled fast. By tomorrow, there would likely be reporters calling, perhaps interview requests. The thought would normally spike her anxiety, but somehow it felt different this time. If telling their story helped people understand the vital work of service dogs, not just as helpers for their handlers, but as protectors of the wider community, maybe the discomfort would be worthwhile. Echo settled into his seat, his alert posture replaced with relaxed vigilance. Always ready, but no longer detecting danger. Jessica caught his gaze in the rearview mirror and felt a surge of gratitude for this extraordinary animal who had transformed her life and now had saved another's. Trust your dog. It was the first rule they taught in service dog training, the foundation upon which all other commands were built. Today had proven why that trust wasn't just training dogma, but profound wisdom. Sometimes your partner could perceive things invisible to human senses and human judgment. Sometimes trust was the difference between tragedy and miracle. Have you ever witnessed a moment when an animal sensed something humans completely missed? What do you think gives some animals this extraordinary ability to detect medical emergencies before visible symptoms appear? Would you have trusted a service dog's alert about a stranger's baby, even if it meant potentially embarrassing yourself? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story touched your heart, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more incredible stories of heroic service animals. Press the bell icon to be notified when we upload new videos every week. Share this video with friends and family who appreciate the extraordinary bond between humans and their service animals. Check out our previous Canine Hero stories appearing on your screen now, and join us tomorrow at the same time for another amazing story you won't want to miss.